Richard stood by the cafe window, watching the crisp autumn leaves dance across the cobblestones. His assistant had insisted he give this one last chance, a final blind date, before resigning himself to loneliness at 52. He had built an empire from scratch, turning a small software startup into a thriving tech company with thousands of employees. Yet all that success couldn't fill the emptiness in his home. Emma, his 8-year-old daughter, was everything to him. Bright, curious, and full of life, she carried the gentle smile of her late mother, Sarah, who had passed 3 years ago, leaving a void that seemed impossible to fill. Richard had tried dating before, mostly to appease his sister, who worried he was isolating himself. But each attempt had ended the same way. Women impressed by his title, the CEO, never understanding the father who checked for monsters under bed, who treasured his daughter's artwork adorning his office walls. Glancing at his watch, Richard noticed she was late. Part of him secretly hoped she wouldn't come at all. He could tell his sister he tried, and she'd leave him alone for a while. The cafe he had chosen was quiet and tucked away from the busy district, perfect for avoiding the public eye. He sat at a corner table, coffee growing cold, rehearsing his polite exit strategy. Then he saw her. Julia, a young woman in her late 20s, approached the entrance, her long blonde hair catching the afternoon light. She wore a simple beige sweater and a flowing skate, nothing flashy or designer. Nervous, she clutched a canvas tote bag against the side. But it was the other arm that froze Richard in place, a pink unicorn. Not just any unicorn, but one identical to the one Emma had lost 6 months ago during a hospital visit. That unicorn had been her constant comfort in the darkest days following her mother's passing. They had searched everywhere, hospital lost and found, community boards, dozens of stores, without success. Now, Julia was here, holding it. Their eyes met, and she gave a tentative smile, walking toward his table. "Mr. Westwood?" she asked softly. "Yes," he replied. "And you must be Julia." "I'm so sorry I'm late," she stammered, placing a bag down but still holding the unicorn. "The bus was delayed, and I didn't want to take a cab because I'm budgeting. Now I see I should have taken it anyway. I'm so sorry for keeping you waiting." She rambled, nervous yet charming. Richard motioned for her to sit. She laughed lightly, embarrassed. "I volunteer at Children's Memorial Hospital. One of the kids I read to ask me to hold Mr. Sparkles while she had her treatment. She fell asleep, and I didn't want to wake her." Richard listened intently as Julia spoke of her work as a kindergarten teacher and volunteer reader at the hospital. She gently placed the unicorn beside her. "There's this little girl, Emma Westwood," Julia said. "She lost her unicorn months ago. It was special. It was from her mom." Richard felt the air leave his lungs. "Emma Westwood," he repeated silently. "I'm Emma's father," he admitted. Julia's face went pale. "Oh my God," she whispered, realizing the connection. They sat in stunned silence. Julia explained that the unicorn was actually a replacement for another girl's toy, Sophie, but she had searched tirelessly to find one for Emma. She also revealed that Emma had talked about her father often, how he made her breakfast, and sang songs her mom used to sing. Richard felt an unexpected tightness in his chest. This young woman had quietly been part of his daughter's life without him realizing it. "I was planning to leave after 20 minutes, Richard admitted. "Not good at this. I have done it before." Julia smiled gently. "Emma told me your sister keeps trying to find you a girlfriend. She worries about you and wishes you smiled more like you do in the pictures with her mom. Maybe you don't need to remember your past. Maybe you just need to find new reasons." They talked for hours. Julia shared stories of her childhood, losing her father at 21, why she became a teacher, and why she volunteered at a hospital. Richard shared his guilt for enjoying life without Sarah, the fear of missing Emma's milestones, and how he buried himself in work to avoid his empty home. Julia reassured him, "You're not missing it. Emma knows you love her. She tells everyone who will listen about her dad who built a blanket fort so big it took over the living room." For the first time in weeks, Richard laughed genuinely. The sun was setting as they left the cafe. On the way to the bus stop, he asked, "Would you like to have dinner sometime? A real dinner, not a blind date setup." "I'd like that," Julia replied. Then she added, "I don't care about your company or your money. I care about Emma's dad, who still checked for monsters under the bed." Richard's eyes burned with emotion. She hesitated. The age difference. Let them talk, he said. I'm tired of pretending to have it all together. I'm tired of being alone. Julia reached for his hand. Then don't be their first real date. From that night onward, small dates, farmers' markets, concerts, and quiet moments built a bond between them, a foundation of trust, patience, and understanding. The following weeks brought new rhythms into Richard's life. Saturday mornings became a quiet ritual. Julia, Emma, and he would meet at the local park, often bringing a soccer ball or a small picnic. Emma's laughter filled the air as she ran ahead, her little feet chasing the ball while Richard jogged after her. Julia followed, sometimes calling out encouragement, sometimes laughing at her own off-key attempts to sing little songs for Emma. At first, Richard kept a careful distance. He had been burned by past attempts at romance and feared rushing anything with Julia. But her presence was disarming. She didn't see him as a wealthy CEO or man burdened with loss. She saw him as Emma's father, a man trying his best, often imperfect but full of love. And slowly, Richard began to let himself feel comfortable around her. Emma, of course, had no reservations. She adored Julia instantly, finding in her a warmth that complemented the void her mother had left behind. The pink unicorn became a symbol of their growing bond. Julia would read stories to Emma while Richard prepared breakfast, or they would play board games and draw pictures together. The house that had once felt heavy and quiet now buzzed with laughter, tiny footsteps, and the soft patter of new memories forming. One Saturday, Richard decided to take them both to the Natural History Museum. Emma had recently developed an obsession with dinosaurs, and Julia knew this. They spent hours wandering the exhibits, pointing at fossils and bones, sharing facts, and making jokes. Julia's gentle humor and Richard's protective attention made Emma beam. Richard noticed how easily Julia fit into the space, how naturally she interacted with his daughter, without pretense, without hesitation. Evenings became equally significant. After Emma was tucked in bed, Richard and Julia would sit on the back porch, sipping coffee or tea, and talk about their days. They spoke of fears, past regrets, and hopes for the future. Richard confessed the guilt he carried for laughing or enjoying life without Sarah, the fear of missing Emma's milestones while consumed by work. Julia listened patiently, offering empathy and reassurance. "You're already doing more than enough," she said. "Emma knows she's loved every single day." Richard also began to notice small, tender gestures from Julia that revealed her love not just for Emma, but for him too. She left sticky notes for him around the house, brewed his coffee just the way he liked it, and remembered stories he told months ago. It was as if she had stepped into a rhythm that he didn't realize he had been missing, yet had always needed. 3 months into their growing bond, Julia accompanied Richard and Emma to the hospital during one of Emma's regular checkups. Emma's eyes lit up when she saw Julia in the hallway. "Julia, you came to see me," she exclaimed. Richard walked behind them, coffee in hand, and smiled. "Hi, princess," he said. Julia knelt down, holding Emma's hands. "Is that okay?" she asked softly. Emma's face split into the brightest smile he had seen in years. "Yes, Dad, she can come to our house and read me stories, and make pancakes." Julia laughed, tears in her eyes. "I can definitely make pancakes," she said. That night, the 3 of them had dinner together at Richard's house for the first time. Emma insisted on giving Julia the full tour of her room, showing her every stuffed animal, every rock she had collected, and even little handmade crafts. It was a warm, chaotic, perfect moment. Richard watched silently, feeling an unfamiliar peace settle over him. The emptiness that had haunted his home for years was slowly fading, replaced by laughter, connection, and love. Richard and Julia continued building their bond through everyday life. Weekends turned into small adventures, farmers' markets, picnics, simple walks, and quiet evenings. Slowly but surely, their friendship blossomed into something deeper. The age difference that had seemed so daunting at first became irrelevant. They found in each other a rare understanding and a shared dedication to Emma, who thrived under the love and attention from both adults in her life. The foundation they built was not rushed, not forced. It was born from patience, care, and shared experiences, the simple act of showing up for each other and for Emma. Each small moment, the laughter, the stories, the pancakes, the soccer games, wove a tapestry of trust and affection. Julia was no longer just a visitor in their lives. She was becoming part of the family in every meaningful sense. Richard realized he had been guarding his heart for too long. But now, with Julia beside him and Emma thriving, he could finally allow himself to hope again. The house was no longer empty. The walls echoed with laughter. The pink unicorn rested safely in Emma's room, and the scent of pancakes lingered in the kitchen. Life was messy, unpredictable, but undeniably beautiful. And Richard knew, for the first time in years, that he didn't have to face it alone. Months passed, and the bond between Richard, Julia, and Emma grew stronger. Their weekend became filled with small adventures, each one reinforcing the sense of family forming around them. From farmers' markets to casual walks in the park, from quiet evenings reading stories to playful mornings making pancakes, every moment stitched them closer together. Emma's laughter echoed through the house, and the once silent walls were now alive with warmth and joy. Richard began noticing subtle ways Julia had integrated herself into their lives. She learned Emma's routines, remembered her favorite bedtime stories, and even helped with her art projects. Julia's presence didn't replace the memory of Sarah, it enhanced it. Richard found comfort in watching Emma trust Julia completely, her little hands gripping Julia's during trips to the park, her eyes lighting up when Julia cheered for her at soccer games. The pink unicorn, once a symbol of loss, had become a symbol of their growing family. One crisp autumn morning, Richard decided it was time to revisit the place that had once brought him both grief and hope, the small clearing by the lake where he had proposed to Sarah years ago. Emma skipped along, oblivious to the significance of the spot, clutching the pink unicorn in her tiny hands. Julia walked beside Richard, her smile warm, her presence comforting. Richard knelt down in the clearing, heart racing. He looked at Julia, his eyes reflecting the mixture of excitement and nervousness he hadn't felt in years. "Julia," he began, voice steady despite the flood of emotions, "I thought I had my one chance at happiness. I thought that chapter of my life was closed. But you walked into that cafe carrying a pink unicorn, and you reminded me that life doesn't end when we think it does. It just changes. Will you marry me? Will you marry us?" Tears streamed down Julia's face as she nodded, whispering a heartfelt yes to both. Emma cheered, throwing her arms around Julia, her laughter ringing across the clearing. Richard stood, enveloping both his girls in a tight embrace. At that moment, he realized that true happiness wasn't about perfection, wealth, or accomplishments. It was about love, connection, and showing up for the people who mattered most. A year later, the family celebrated a small, intimate wedding in Richard's backyard. Close friends and family gathered under the warm September sun. Emma, now fully understanding the significance of the day, took her role as flower girl seriously. She scattered petals carefully along the aisle, her white dress dotted with pink flowers. When Richard and Julia exchanged vows, Emma was included, her tiny hands clutching theirs as they promised to face life together as a family. During the reception, Emma gave a speech that brought laughter and tears alike. "When my mom went to heaven, I thought my dad would be sad forever," she began, her voice trembling slightly. But then Julia came, and she made him smile again. Not the same smile he had with Mom, but a new smile. And that's okay, because we're making new happy memories while keeping the old ones safe in our hearts. Also, Julia makes really good pancakes. The crowd erupted in applause, some laughing, others wiping away tears. Richard looked at Julia, his eyes glistening. She had become not just his partner, but the heart of their home, a mother figure to Emma, and a confidant to him. That evening, after the guests had left and Emma was fast asleep, Richard and Julia sat on the back porch, the warm glow of the sunset casting a soft light over them. "What are you thinking?" Julia asked. Richard smiled, glancing at the stars beginning to appear. "I'm thinking about how I almost didn't show up that day at the cafe. How I was planning to leave after 20 minutes. And what changed your mind?" Julia asked softly. "A pink unicorn," Richard said, chuckling, "and the woman carrying it, who saw me, not the CEO, who loved my daughter before she even loved me, who taught me it's okay to let someone in." Julia leaned her head against his shoulder. "Thank you for letting me in," she whispered. "Thank you for walking in," Richard replied, kissing her gently. In the quiet that followed, they sat together, watching the stars emerge one by one. Life had brought them together in unexpected ways, a lost toy, a blind date, and a little girl who needed them both. They had built a family not from perfection, but from patience, love, and courage to try again. The house was alive with laughter, and Emma's pink unicorns rested safely in her room. One old, one new, symbols of love, loss, and the unexpected joys that life had returned to them. Richard reflected on the journey that had brought him here. Years of building an empire, countless sacrifices, moments of grief and solitude, all had led to this. The greatest achievement of his life wasn't his success in business, but this family he had found through chance, choice, and love. He realized that the heart has an infinite capacity for healing, for love, and for creating new beginnings even after loss. The story of Richard, Julia, and Emma was proof that sometimes what seems like an ending is really a new beginning. That sometimes the smallest, most unexpected gestures, a pink unicorn, a handwritten note, a shared story, can transform lives forever. And sometimes, the people who enter your life quietly and unexpectedly are the ones who leave the biggest mark on your heart. Richard squeezed Julia's hand, feeling complete in a way he hadn't in years. Love had returned, not as a replacement for what was lost, but as a beautiful addition to the life they were now building together. And as they watched the stars, the soft hum of their home behind them, Richard knew that happiness, family, and love were not things to be found. They were things to be chosen, nurtured, and treasured.